When you first ran for president, you ran as a Democrat, right?
Yeah.
And then why did you? I understand why you ran as a Democrat, because historically your family.
This will be the last talking point of this particular interview for today's show. So this is the last thing. This is a very interesting thing because a lot of people wonder why RFK is running as an independent when his family's been a Democrat the entire time. He gets a lot of actual backlash from his family for, oh, you're a spoiler candidate. Well, we're going to hear a little bit about why he's running as an independent and how he was kind of forced in this position because people did not want him to compete for a primary with the Democrats, which would be the Democratic thing to do, right, Danny? You're a Democrat. Isn't the Democratic thing to do to let everybody have an open primary and let the people determine who's going to be the nominee? Right now, there was no open primary. Kamala Harris did not go through the democratic process of allowing the people to nominate her. She was just pushed there in a very strategic way. Kudos to the Democrats for doing that. If the Democratic Party, the actual people, are going to accept it.
You're a Kennedy. I mean,
Yeah.
you literally are a Democrat, right?
Yeah.
Learning in when you first ran for president, you ran as a Democrat, right?
Yeah.
And then why did you? I understand why you ran as a Democrat, because historically your
I'm
family.
a Democrat.
You're a Kennedy. I mean,
Yeah.
you're literally our country's royalty. But where do you then get the decision? Where do you make the decision? You know what? I'm about to go over here and be an independent. And without protection, which we're going to get into that in a minute, because that was kind of shady. Because once you're a Kennedy, given the history of your family, and now you're out there as a person whose name is in the conversation to become the president of the United States, it should have been a no-brainer that you were given Secret Service protection. But we'll get to that in a minute. What was a decision that made you go, you know what, like many Americans, I'm fed up with or frustrated with the Democratic Party, I'm going to switch to becoming an independent?
I was actually the last person in my campaign that agreed that I had to move out. My campaign manager at that time, Dennis Kucinich, who had run for president twice himself, he said from the beginning, the Democrats are never, ever going to allow you to compete fairly. The Democratic Party is now run by corporations. And, this happened because in 2010, the Supreme Court issued a decision called Citizens United that said that for 100 years it had been illegal for corporations to donate to political parties, federal political parties, and in federal elections. And the Supreme Court, why this business-friendly Supreme Court, wiped that law out in 2010. And they said a political donation is a form of speech. Therefore, it's protected by the First Amendment. Any restriction of it is illegal. And so this tsunami of corporate money began flowing into the Republican and Democratic parties. And it was BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, the pharmaceutical companies, the military industrial.
NRA is one as well.
So the NRA is an NGO. It's not a corporation, so they could donate. And that's why they exercise so much power up until 2010. But in 2010, the amount of they were contributing was dwarfed by what, the oil companies and the coal companies and the pharmaceutical companies were contributing to both parties. And both parties became corporate parties. The Democratic Party completely forgot its relationship with labor. The Democratic Party, when I was growing up, was cops, firefighters.
So when we talk about the parties becoming corporate parties, this is what a lot of people talk about when they say the establishment. Well, I believe that this is what they're talking about. When you have corporations that are able to give significant amounts of money to political campaigns, to political parties, we know that they're going to have a certain level of control, right? What do we always talk about? How certain groups, they put together these super PACs, these large amounts of money. We talked a little bit about it with AIPAC a couple of shows ago, where certain groups will put together these super PACs and will say, hey, I'm donating this money. This group of people that I'm representing, we're donating this money to solve A, B, and C issues. So what ends up happening is now, instead of people campaigning for votes from the people, they're actually being controlled by the people that give them the amount of money to their campaigns, that give them contributions, that set them up with different deals when they get out of office, that set their family members up with certain deals while they're in office, all of these different things. Those corporations are going to be the ones, hey, push this agenda. Don't worry, we'll give you the backing that you need to push it to your people, to make sure that it represents you in a favorable way, so therefore you can win the votes of the people. This is what's happening with the big corporations. When we hear about these Black Rocks, all these different companies that join together to control or to buy these big pharmaceutical industries and companies in the pharmaceutical industry, they're all the same. So this is why they give us the bad food. This is why they can easily, how hard would it be to say that these ingredients, these processed ingredients, we're outlawing them because they're not healthy for our people. These ingredients are causing harm to our citizens, so therefore we're outlawing them, just like Europe did. Just like European countries. You get what I'm saying? So the only reason you don't do it is because you don't care, or it's because it's in your best interest. So it's in their best interest. Lucille just brought it up. You have to have a problem. In order to sell a particular product, you have to have a problem that product solves. So therefore, they've done a good job, or evil job, I would say. But for them, they've done something that puts them in a position to where they can capitalize off of all of the problems that they are causing. That's when you have the big corporations running the political parties, Democrat and Republican, compared to just being run on integrity, values, principles, and being a representative of what's best for the people.
Auto workers, factory workers, they completely sold them out with these trade bills, and the labor union movement has been crushed in it. They don't even stand up for Amazon driver, Amazon or Uber drivers. Democrats don't care about that stuff anymore. They used to be labor oriented, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of and they became completely corporate, and that's why they had to destroy Bernie Sanders. Bernie was beating Trump 54 to I think 40, 45 or 46. And in the same polls were showing Hillary losing to him, but the party wanted a corporate-friendly, military-friendly, candidate, and they'd rather lose the election than have somebody who could threaten the corporate profit-taking and the mercantile interests of these big companies. So for me, I was 10 times worse than Bernie Sanders. And everybody told me they're never going to let you do it, but I thought, how can they prevent me? And then I saw what they were doing. And for example, they made 60 different rule changes to make sure I could not win.
Yo, please listen to this, because a lot of these things I was not aware of what an independent has to go through, and how they made certain changes just to put RFK Jr. specifically in the worst position to get our support. But even as far as the amount of money that RFK is able to receive in donations, it is minimal compared to the amount of money that a candidate with the Democrats or the Republican Party would be able to receive. We got to finish this part of this interview because it is very informative.
Democrats or the Republicans?
The Democrats.
Got it.
And I saw what they were doing. And for example, they made 60 different rule changes to make sure I could not win.
The Democrats or the Republicans?
The Democrats.
Got it.
I'll give you an example of one of them. I was in New Hampshire, and I was doing really well in New Hampshire. That's always been the first primary. And if I had won New Hampshire, it would have sent a huge signal. So they made a rule, the Democratic Party, that any candidate that steps foot into the state of New Hampshire, that all of their votes will go to President Biden. So that's how blatant it was. So I was not, even if I won the state of New Hampshire, I wouldn't have got one delegate. Mm. And then they shut down some entire primaries like Florida, and they just made it impossible they did 60 different rule changes that were all designed to keep me from, no matter how many votes I got, to keep me from winning the nomination. So at that point, I just said, okay, they've made it clear that they got their candidate. It's President Biden. They're not going to let him debate. They're not going to let him out of the basement. They're going to just ram him through.
My question, especially for a lot of the Democrats, how do you feel about your party, who's supposed to be a party of the people, built on democracy, right? We all vote. How do you feel knowing that your party limited democracy? How do you feel knowing that you did not vote for a nominee in a primary? How do you feel that RFK Jr. specifically was targeted and they put certain rules in place so he wouldn't even be up for consideration? Like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel that, especially, and let me ask you this, the question is, maybe it doesn't make as much sense now because of the Kamala buzz, but this is during a time where a lot of people were saying that, look, Biden cannot run again. This was during a time where a lot of people were voting saying that they did not want, like, this was the first time that this many people in history did not want the two candidates. It was Biden versus Trump running. This was during that time. So how do you feel about the party that you've rocked with your entire life or for however long doing what they did with RFK Jr.? Do you feel that that's a true democracy? Do you feel that that's a Democratic Party? And does it just show that they don't care what the people think? I don't know. I'm just wondering, like, what is the mindset of people? Like, how do you see this and you're just still okay with voting for those same candidates? I'm just wondering, right? Like, people that are just scared of competition, scared of actually RFK just competing against Kamala, competing against Gavin Newsom, competing against all these people that would have come out, I assume, and been a part of this open primary.
And if it's bad for them. The same reason it was bad for them to destroy Bernie. If they had made him debate earlier, a lot of his deficits would have become obvious to the American people. Other people would have gotten in the race. Gavin Newsom would have gotten in, Governor Whitmer, Kamala, all of these people.
So you think they strategically let him come out later to be able to ensure that he was their nominee?
I don't know why they let him come out, at that point, because that was an early debate. But normally, the president, when you're running a primary, everybody debates. There's debates in the primary, and then there's later debates in September in the general. And they would not let him debate. They wouldn't let him out. They were pretending that I didn't exist, and they were then passing all these rules that made it impossible for me to win. So I changed to independent. They tried to make that impossible. They passed all of these rules, making it so that I'd have to get 2 million signatures. And, in these very draconian Byzantine rules about how many counties you have to get them in, and every state is different. And then they sue me in every state. But, today we announced we're already on the ballot, or we've got enough signatures to be on the ballot in 42 states. We'll have the next 8 states within 2 weeks, and we'll be on.
And real quickly, I want to respond to something that Danny wrote. I asked Danny, as somebody that doesn't live in the States, why are you so interested in U.S. politics? And I'm actually appreciative of the fact that you're interested in it. And it almost says a lot because you're interested in politics, I would say, more so in America than a lot of Americans. So that's something to say about us appreciating where we live, us appreciating the opportunities that we have to sway elections one way or another and to make our actual voices be heard. So I'm with you. I'm appreciative that you care so much about American politics. Perhaps I'm just more so questioning why more Americans aren't as interested in it. But that's neither here nor there. I want to hopefully, I may need to speed it up a little bit, but I want to get to him talking about the donations because I think that that's something that will probably, throw y'all off a little bit, blow your mind a bit.
On the ballot in every state in Washington.
Some research, and I didn't even know, even in the fundraising rules,
Here we go.
I know my limit as a city councilman is $5,500 is my max. Your max donation is what?
$6,600.
Which is only 1,100 more, or what? Yeah, 1,000 more than me.
Yeah,
1,100 more than me.
1,100
Yeah,
more.
I can add them. Just trying to
But
get to
President Biden, President Trump, you know, their parties wrote the rule. They can make 750,000
per individual.
per individual.
So it's almost like the cards are stacked to keep a third party out of a
Yeah,
two-party
they're
system.
absolutely. They after Ross Perot ran and got on the ballot and threatened their hegemony over they went in and systematically passed all these rules just to make it completely impossible for an independent to run. It's a miracle that we've been able to make it. It's a testimony to, you know, we have 100,000 volunteers and we have an extraordinary staff, and we accomplished a logistical miracle to do this. But you know, that their whole purpose is to make sure I stay off. And then we were at a lot of other disadvantages. We had the fundraising disadvantage. We could only raise 1/10 the money that they can. We had to pay $15 million.
They can only raise 1/10 of the money that the other candidates can raise. This is as independents. I did not know any of this.
For ballot access. We have to pay another $6 million to defend their lawsuits against our ballot access, frivolous lawsuits. And then they wouldn't give me.
Do y'all ever wonder, like, I don't know. It's funny. I saw this clip of this girl saying the other day, she's like, when people don't like somebody, I intentionally try to figure out what to like about that person, because it just feels like when everybody hates on somebody, it just feels like y'all being haters, my mentality. Do y'all sit back and wonder, why are they trying so hard? Why are they trying so hard to keep somebody out of the race? Like a true competitor, you want to compete with the best, right? You want to compete with the best. You're feeling confident in yourself to the point where it's like, no, let the best people come. I don't want to, if I want to win, I want to win something based on me actually winning, not me being able to strategically do some corny stuff and just keep my greatest competitor out the race. That's not what a democracy is, right? So I'm just wondering, does that matter to us?
Secret Service protection, which was costing me $1 million a month, because I needed, you know, I was getting attacked all the time.
Were you getting death threats?
Yeah, we got constant death. We sent them 68 pages. The Secret Service told the White House I was at an elevated risk. The White House made the decision, don't give him Secret Service protection. I was right down.
Did y'all just hear that? The Secret Service, their recommendation, and they told the White House that he was at an elevated risk for an attack. And the White House still denied him Secret Service. His family, the history that his family has, his uncle was killed, his dad was killed, I think somebody else in their family as well. Political crimes. And they still would not provide this man civil service protection. I mean, Secret Service protection, civil service protection. I know we like to think that we live in this perfect world where our politicians, you know, we like to watch movies. Like I was on like a Born Supremacy, Born Identity binge with my boy Jason Bourne this weekend. And we watch these shows like a Scandal, or we watch all these shows and we act as if they're not really happening. You know what's so funny? We'll watch a show like Power, popular show, right? And I don't think you'd have to convince people that that stuff happens. You know what I mean? Like it's a show on, it may be, you know, amping stuff up a little bit. It may be doing that, exaggerating certain things, but it's very clear that people sell drugs. You know what happens? You know, like people sell drugs, people, you know, get these crime organizations and they do crime. It is what it is. I don't think anybody's sitting here saying like, oh, that's not true. That's just fantasy. Like that's fiction. No, it actually happens. But when it comes to these other shows and movies, we sit here and act as if our country does not have these secret organizations that make certain decisions that, you know, this person is better for the country if this person goes, or it's better for the, it happens. So I don't know what your takeaway would be from hearing something like this when it comes to RFK, when the Secret Service recommends that you are at a high risk and you should have Secret Service protection, and the White House decides that you will not. What other message could be sent?
Here in Los Angeles, you know, about, I don't know, 3 months ago, and I was giving a speech at a Hispanic rally. And it was an indoor rally, and a guy showed up, and he had a U.S. Marshal badge on, he had federal ID on his belt, and he was carrying a backpack, and he demanded to see me in my green room before I.
And a question for Danny, because I saw Danny wrote, "Here comes the right-wing victim card." Danny, as somebody, you said that you've studied politics for a long time in U.S. politics. What makes you think that RFK is right-wing? Like, what makes you think that he's not a traditional Democrat? As somebody that's been fighting for the people, fighting against the larger corporations his entire life, somebody who's still pushing things for the people, somebody who's working against the establishment, somebody who's anti-war. Let me repeat that again. Somebody who's anti-war, somebody who's for the labor unions. These are all the things that a Democrat was and represented. So I'm just confused as to why you keep thinking that RFK Jr. is a right-wing guy. So, and I don't, and you just wrote something about Trump does the same thing. He always feels so sorry for himself. Why compare? What does RFK Jr. have to deal with Trump in this situation? Like, what does one have to do with the other? Like, and this is a great point that Guidewer just, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Guidewer just brought up Kamala Harris is not a Democrat. RFK is. Like, RFK Jr. is a Democrat. And just a heads up for somebody who, I know that you're not living in this country. When I talk to Democrats, not the extreme ones, but when I talk to a lot of the moderate Democrats, they sound very similar to a RFK Jr. They push a lot of the same things. They are aligned with the same principles. So I'm just wondering, from the outside looking in, what makes you, as somebody living in Denmark who studies U.S. politics, what makes you see RFK Jr. as somebody who's on the right wing when we're in the States and we don't see it that way? And his entire family history has been with the Democrats, and the things that he actually speaks on are from a Democratic perspective. Like, I know now we look at Democrats wanting to go to war. The Democratic Party, what I thought was more so, growing up, the party that did not want to get into wars, the party that did stand up for the little guy, right? That's what he's done his entire career outside of politics. Like, that's just what he was actually doing, standing up for the little guy. So I'm just wondering why you think that he's a right-wing person. And Danny responds and says, he is trying to take votes from the undecided and he will endorse Trump. That's why. He's trying to take votes from the undecided. Isn't that what any candidate does, Danny? You try to get the votes of the people that are undecided on who they're going to vote for. And this man Trump has already tried to get him on board. He said no. And I don't know. I guess we'll address it when it gets there. Let's keep going a little bit.
Went on. One of my protectors, one of my, the Gavin DeBecker people that I hired to protect me, looked at his U.S. Marshal badge and saw that it was a little too shiny. So they kind of drilled down on him and started questioning. They found on him 2 shoulder holsters with loaded magazines. He had in his backpack a dozen other.
Guy to work. All right, yeah, we needed you, brother. All right, so I must set up a little sparring session between Danny and Guy to work. Yeah, Danny, send that energy to Guy to work. Guy to work just wrote, even Google doesn't know what Kamala's policies are. I just saw something where Kamala came out and said that she's going to address inflation from day one. Am I confused, or does Kamala not understand that she's been in the White House for the last 3+ years? Show me what you've done. Like, this reminds me of college football. Like, you ever had certain athletes, they have amazing high school careers, And then you have somebody else that just shows potential. I don't know, maybe they're 6'3", and you just looking at it like, bro, like they didn't even do anything in high school. How are they getting selected now to do something in college? And it goes, and and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But this particular situation reminds me of that. It just reminds me of that. Like literally, Kamala is not being held to any standard of what she's done. When it's in her best interest, she'll align herself with Joe Biden's policies. But then it's like when it's not in her best interest, she'll act as if she's just a new candidate running who's not actually the vice president. I don't know. Maybe I'm just seeing that.
Other magazines filled with bullets, and he had 2 other pistols. He had knives. He had a laser-sighted pistol, stuff that you don't bring to a job interview. And he, before leaving his home, he had made a TikTok video, the only video he ever made on TikTok. That was basically a suicide mission video. He was saying, if I don't come back from this mission, here's what you do. I'm about to go on a death-defying mission. So it had all of the indicia of a serious attempt to do something bad. And that was one. My house was broken into 3 times.
Wait, so when you reported that and you sent over all this documentation, do you get Secret Service then?
No, and the LAPD released the guy the next day.
Wow.
So he's still out there. And then I had 3 break-ins at my house. One of the break-ins, a guy made it to the 2nd floor. My family was home. And then the police, LAPD, picked him up. 2 hours later, released him, and he came right back to my house and broke in again.
All right. So I think we got enough of